The first moderator, the first speaker is the technical director of African Organization for Standardization, Ruben Gisore, who has an extensive experience dealing with standardization work and conformity assessment in East Africa community and at the continental level. Ruben Gisore is going to give us a presentation on facilitating trade by the elimination of unnecessary and unjustifiable TBT and SPS measures, the interplay between TBT and SPS measures in key priority areas for Africa and strengthening cooperation and transparency among stakeholders. Ruben Gisore, you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I will start with this presentation by observing that Africa has the potential to participate in international trade and even at the continental level in trading in food and agriculture products. But at the moment, we are facing challenges of understanding and interfacing the two aspects of TBTs and SPS in a way that is seamless, unlike the other continents where it has been achieved. Be having similar characteristics in terms of what do we want to check. And in that case, when we are saying we want to assess and make sure that the product is safe, the product is quality, and can be traded, the instruments to utilize are actually the same, but the approaches are different. So I'll start this by introducing the African Organization for Standardization. Briefly, it's an intergovernmental organization established in 1977. So I don't want to go into the details which you already may have. Now, the purpose or why the African organization exists essentially is to ensure that we're able to trade. The products made in the continent are able to move across the borders without having any hindrances or barriers that may be occasioned by standards as one of the barriers that or measures that could prevent them. So in that respect, what the African Organization for Standardization does is to have harmonized standards and conformity assessment systems that would enable these products to be traded within a continent and outside the continent. Now, when you look at the continent, in terms of agriculture, it's a major contributor to the GDP and export earnings of the countries. And over 80% of the population in Africa relies on agriculture for their livelihoods. And in turn, that employs over 60 to 65% of the people in the continent. So for that matter, this is an important aspect or an important sector that we need to really address and ensure that it is facilitated to do the business and therefore able to continue supporting and even becoming more in terms of generating more revenues, more employment and development prospects for the continent. When we look at what is happening in the continent, you find that the issues in terms of standardization in agriculture and food products is where we have challenges by the various legislations, by the various misunderstandings that we have between institutions that are in charge of standardization or in quality infrastructure, and those who are in charge of the SPS, animal health and public health and safety on the one hand. And in this respect, there is need for unity to ensure that we target the development of the continent rather than having to stand by what we think our mandates are instead of supporting the trade prospects of the continent. So when this happens, actually what happens in turn is that we're able to import more products, we're able to export unprocessed products, and there is that failure to create wealth from what we produce. In that case, we really get that the population is suffering from unemployment, from undernutrition, whereas we know that we have a bigger opportunity to produce more, to process more, and to trade more and earn more incomes for the populations. So that is one of the things that we look at, and we find that we really need to work harder in that respect. Now, under the LCFTA, we can already see that there is a thinking that has taken place, that there is need for cooperation. Now, even if we have two annexes that deal with this aspect, we do have Annex 6, which deals with technical barriers to trade. And in this respect, it touches on issues of cooperation in standardization, that's through AFSEC and ARSO, and metrology through AfriMet, and accreditation through AFRAC. All these are aimed at ensuring that the provisions of the protocol on trading goods is achieved. Similarly, when you look at the Annex 7, which deals with the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, the implementation of this is by the SPS committee, and the aim in this respect is narrowed down to trading goods. But in this respect, it is trading goods resulting from animals, animal products, or animal byproducts, plant products, and plant byproducts. Now, when you look at the totality of it, these are still goods. And so under the FCFTA protocol on trading goods, the emphasis is on free movement of the goods, satisfying both the TBT and SPS requirements. So that calls for the institutional cooperation to ensure that we are able to actually make sure these products move freely across the borders. So what happens? We see that there is a role for SPS, metrology, standards, testing, and marketing on the same products. The beef, for example, if you're talking about beef, if we are talking about poultry, or if we are talking about live animals in trade, we realize that they must pass the SPS measures through testing, which is a QI, or quality infrastructure, or TBT institution, and inspection, which are also a TBT aspect. And when you look at the the processing of the products, they must be standardized. They must be measured in accordance to market measures or portions. Then they are packaged, they are labeled and coded as per trade and technical standards and metrology requirements. So if you look at that, you already see that these SPS and TBT issues are interweaved, and they're addressing one product. And for that matter, really what is expected is that we as the people of the continent understand and guide the processes so that they are unified and the products are able to move seamlessly through the borders and to international markets. When you look at even fish, it has to pass through the SPS issues. It has to pass through inspection and testing and graded in terms of weights, coded in, packed, and labeled. So those requisite requirements also have that interdependence of the institutions that are required. So that cooperation is highly required to ensure that it can facilitate trade. Now, when we look at the committees that deal with aspects that touch on both TBT and SPS issues, at the ASO level, we have 10 committees ranging from apiculture all the way to agriculture and biotechnology. Now, the participation to this extent, luckily for us, has been that we have people from the member states who are from the SPS issues and also those who are from the TBT issues. And this has resulted in having standards that address the issues of TBT and also address the issues of SPS. Now, these are the cards I was talking about. When you look at the animal, of course, we look at it, the person from the veterinary services already has an idea what they are going to be looking at. But if I'm a person who is involved in processing and selling the animal products, I also look at how do I code the various parts of the animal so that when we are selling, you can maximize on the profits from that animal. So it's not about selling the whole animal life, but also processing and getting more out of it. So all these are examples from the cows, that's the beef, then we have the poultry, and then we have the fish aspect. The packaging and everything else that happens is indicated. So what do the standards cover to ensure that we are able to address all these issues? They look at the terminologies, the codes of practice, and in the codes of practice is where you find issues of SPS being addressed very well. Then there are also aspects of specifications, then methods of test, metrological characteristics, ensuring that the weights are adhered to, and then the water and environmental quality, health and safety issues are also addressed. A sample of some of the requirements, for example, these are typically SPS issues. These are limits on microbiological parameters. Now, SPS group will be interested in ensuring that the microbiological loads are not harmful. And in that respect, the measurements that need to be done are done in laboratories which are accredited. And therefore, you notice that all those aspects of the quality infrastructure are also involved. When you look at the safety aspects, for example, talking of the heavy metals, we look at the limits that are acceptable, and they are measured in accordance with specific standards that are recognized and accepted across the continent, across the world. And these are some of the samples of the methods of test, including as the standard, a typical standard that's in process. Looking at the grading issues, yes, you have a fish that you need to grade. If you have the sardines, for example, and you need to do the grading part of it, they are the large part, they are the large sizes, they are medium sizes, small sizes. If you're looking at the fillet out of a fish, you're also looking at measurements. So you actually combine. If you look at this, you are combining all the aspects of SPS, the TBT issues, the health issues, the trade issues that go with all this. And therefore, there is that need that at the national levels, at the continental levels, we understand the very important need that we coordinate our activities to facilitate trade in agriculture and food products by looking at the institutional interlinkages that make this possible. Now, it's not possible that we can have one set of institutions deciding the whole process, but rather having these cross-cutting issues addressed by looking at the various functions and understanding the interfaces between these institutions, and therefore accepting that the interplay can assist us in unifying our purpose of doing trade regionally or at even the national level and also at the international level. So if we are able to get this very clearly, then we will have the success in the continental free trade area. I wish to end at that point and indicate that in case of any examples that may be necessary, we shall be providing this presentation to assist with the understanding of the kind of cooperation that we are seeking to establish within the continent so that we can effectively trade in the continent and also have an impact at the global level. Thank you very much, and I wish
Thank you very much, Ruben, for your presentation. Actually, it's a very small question on my side, because when I look at what you presented, showing the meat and pottery and the fishery in the fish side, the interlink on TBT issues and SPS issues that we find in the standards. Now, I was in my mind asking myself why actually there are even organizations assigned to deal with some one issues or different issues at the level for SPS mainly. On the TBT issue side, the WTO agreement doesn't mention clearly which organization to do that. But probably that is another debate one day. I would like to ask you one question. What are the key challenges when you look at the application of TBT and the SPS WTO agreement, when ARZO is facing when the technical experts are developing the standards? What are the key challenges you found out? I saw 10 committees that are touching on SPS and the TBT issues on agriculture and food product.
I think, thank you for the question. I think one of the challenges that we face is the understanding of the end result or the bigger picture. Because if you look at the products, they are essentially the same. If you're talking about fish, we want the fish to reach the market, but we want it to reach there when it is safe, it is not going to cause contaminations or have a health challenge. But I think at the same time, the market requires that fish to be of a certain size, packaged in a certain way, processed in a certain manner. So if we could understand that, then it means that we will understand the interdependence of the institutions. But at the moment, what is not really coming out is that there's that misunderstanding that one part can actually succeed on its own, but that is not possible. And therefore, that is where we have a challenge. And you find that when you approach these institutions, they are telling you, we have a law that supports our operations, and the other institutions telling you they also have a law that supports their operations, and therefore they look like they're independent. But the bigger picture is that the laws are aimed at making sure that these products are able to move to the market. And therefore, the experts sometimes don't have that overview, which is what we are trying very much to bring into the focus of the experts. So far, we've been lucky that some of the committees that we've established, all the institutions, whether from the SPS and from the TBT, have agreed that there is a role to play, and therefore, if it is defining the standards so that they have the provisions for SPS and TBT, they have that, and therefore, a person that complies with that standard complies of necessity with all these provisions of SPS, the health issues, the safety issues, and the TBT aspect. And therefore, the product can comfortably, if it is certified, reach the market with that confidence that it has attained all those requirements that are necessary for it to be in the market. So that's what the challenge we have. But so far, we've tried, and we are seeing signs of success, but not yet really fully successful. And therefore, we are working towards ensuring that in the continent that is understood, and we can have seamless, movement of these goods with that proper understanding.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruben. We have our next speaker, who is Engineer Abdesalam Beniachi, who is the Head of Technical Regulation Conformity Directorate at Gulf Standard Organization. His experience of 30 years in quality infrastructure, dealing with technical regulations, and also dealing with conformity assessment. Our presenter, thank you for accepting our invitation. I know we are almost the same organization also in the GSO. We would like to learn from you, looking at your topic on compliance with the agricultural TBT and the SPS, the conformity assessment scheme and regime in the GSO Common Market Regulatory System for food product. Abdesalam, that's your time now. You can share your presentation.
Hopefully, could you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I would like to... Yeah. Okay.
Can see it.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Hermogen, and the ARSO team for this great event and for inviting GSO to participate in. I would like to go directly because we have been asked to focus mainly on challenges, just to raise the question on how to improve things. So if you allow me, given that the presentation will be sent to you, I will begin by a short presentation. My presentation will be on experience of GSO in the domain of manufactured products. So we'll deal mainly with TBT instead of SPS. So GSO, okay. The 6 countries of GCC are mainly in alphabetical order in Arabic: United Arab Emirates, Kingdom of Bahrain, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Sultanate of Oman, State of Qatar, and State of Kuwait. And the GSO is a multi-economic structure, for which the main structure are the ministerial board, comprised by the ministry in charge of standardization, who are mainly Minister of Industry and Trade. And we have a technical council composed by the technical or by chairman of the national standardization body in the region. And we have a presidency, which used to be called the Secretariat, which is based actually in Riyadh. The mission, I just want to make a short hint to the mission of GSO. In our internal bylaw, you will find preparing, issuing standard, technical regulation, act on conformity assessment, harmonizing, coordinating, etc. It's just to tell you that these large set of missions make of GSO not a simple standardization body. It's something more than that, because GSO is developing technical regulation. Sometimes it's developing some act on safety and etc. So it's basically an institution dealing with the whole quality infrastructure component. And having said that, we will see that GSO is dealing with preparing regulation, monitoring conformity assessment, etc., and then dealing with the whole process on QIS, just to ensure the let's say the free trade between member states, and even in the same time the safety. So let's talk about the act founding the GCC. So we have the main act is the GCC chart, which aims at an effective coordination, integration, and interconnection between member states, and particularly in the economic area, which is interesting for GSO. And then we have a second act which has been approved in '82 and updated in 2001, which aims for a single market and with a custom union. Then the key objectives were to avoid or remove TBT, and thus reaching the trade, the free trade between member states, and even between member states and the rest of the world, since all the member states are member of the TBT or signing the TBT agreement. So how to do that? In the practice, the GSO is aiming at free product circulation, and in the same time, consumer protection, which of course are contradictory objectives. How to do this? By removing TBTs, setting up the essential requirement, providing effective technical tools. So just to summarize, not to go into details. So it's instead of developing standard for each kind of product, we will just set up the essential requirement for each product, and then we will give the presumption of conformity to standard. So basically, we take as a benchmark the European approach, saying whenever you comply with standards, so you are supposed to comply with the requirement. So it's basically the principle of let's say the new approach in Europe. So having said that, the manufacturer or the let's say the importer, they have to fulfill the essential requirement, which means they are not obliged to comply with standard. They are obliged to fulfill essential requirement. And whenever they have standard, and whenever they comply with standard, they are supposed to comply with this essential requirement. It's really important to think of how to implement this principle. In principle, it's easy to understand, but the implementation, it makes some technical challenges, if you say. And then the responsibility of producers by a safety act, and by a responsibility on hazard. If even after putting the product into the market, if something raised, the producer remain the main responsible for the product. And then we have the post-market control, which is the responsibility of member states, and then they will do this by market monitoring, etc., etc. This takes me to the process. So the process is the manufacturer will determine what are the technical regulation, what are the essential requirements, and he will choose what conformity assessment he wants, and we make at his disponibility the conformity assessment body well qualified via accreditation and relevant tools to ensure they are competent, and then he will conduct the applicable conformity assessment, leading to constructing a technical file and then affixing the G marking with what we call the GCTS, which is a system of traceability of products. So far this experience has done a good example. We have so far implemented it for toys and for low voltage with really good result and with a good development on coordination with the economic operator mainly. Now, the second part, and which is hard to develop, is the post-market, which is we need to develop the market surveillance, the complaint databases, and etc. Risk assessment by member state just to monitor the safety after putting the product into the market. This is we are not saying that it's already done, but it's under development. So let's go to the essential question I want to deal with. What is the assessment of the situation? What are these challenges? So, as if you say as success, we can talk that the institutional and the experience of GSO. We are directly linked to the GCC. We have clear policies. I have mentioned the economic agreement, and ongoing dialogue with GSO institution is really a good point, I can say. Now, and successful experience in the implementation. Now, what is, and of course, we have an easy access to external expertise. We have a good experience with notified body, with conformity assessment bodies over the world, in North America, in Asia, in over the world. So we have an access, although we are a small team, but we have an easy access to expertise. The challenge is, one of the aspects is the legal. The GSO mandate and objective, as I mentioned in the beginning, GSO is not seen as just a standardization body. It's dealing with the whole quality infrastructure. And then we have to make certain, let's say, distinguishing process of regulation, process of standard, process of conformity assessment. And this is a big challenge. A model of technical regulation harmonization, and this is a good question. If we had the opportunity to talk about it in another question, I would like to develop on this, because it's not only copying a system in Europe. We have to take the lesson learned of what we have done so far and to have our system, and we are thinking of this now. We have an ongoing process for this. Disparity of economies, the economies are not the same. You have big economies while you have some small, and in this area, we have to be smart. We have to develop something smart, which fit for everybody. The opportunities, what are the opportunities? Let's say the policies and objectives of GCC, this is the main. GCC is clear. We have a clear policy to integrate the market and to go for a full integration. The advantage of harmonization, of course, and then an impact of various legislation on trade. If you have, as I thank my colleague for the third presentation, if you have many regulation, many conformity assessment scheme, it doesn't help facilitating trade. Post-crisis situation, I guess it's really a good opportunity. The post-crisis, it's called for further integration. And then the participation and transparency, for me, it's a critical point. It can be seen even as opportunity and as, let's say, treat. If it's good and well used, it can be seen as opportunity. So the treats, the breaker, national reaction to the crisis, and we have seen over the world and even in the region, some countries have the trend to go for national practices, and this doesn't help integrating the regulation. And then the introduction additional requirement conformity assessment scheme, this is the same story. And as I said before, the participation and transparency, which is critical point. For economic operator, the main concern with economic operator, they have raised, we have so far organized three workshop or conferences with economic operator, yearly conferences. So the main concern, they say they want an effective participation to the legislative process. And for us, we see it as an opportunity because they are very supportive and they are very helpful in developing the regulation, to develop smart regulation. We need to set up the better regulation to make the best practice for regulation. And then the additional measure, we have to consider revising them. Conformity assessment, we have to discuss frankly what's the good level of conformity assessment. Do we need a type 5 or type 3 or just a self-declaration? We have to discuss it in a good manner. Once we have the, let's say, the confidence that the good level has been conducted, it's enough. We don't need to make conformity assessment much more higher than what is. essential for demonstrating that product is safe, and that's it. One point, building trust. I guess this is the main point. We have to build trust mainly with economic operator. If we get this trust, they are supportive, and in our experience, they are very supportive. Even from North America, from Europe, they are very supportive once we tell them this is what we are about in really a clear manner. And then, to summarize, so the customer is affected by quality of technical regulation, while economic operator, they want a trade facilitation, and market member state, they have to commit for transparency, and we need certain better regulation to implement them, and then notified body which give for us expertise. Now the step for GSO is this one. The economic operator, we think that our further step is having the trust, constructing the trust, the bridge with economic operator, and discussion with them, and to build something all together. I will just summarize this. So GSO is seeking input from economic operator to make them participate into our regulation at early stage, not at the end of the process of regulation. Effective participation and preparation, expertise and better alternative. We have seen many examples where the economic operator, they give you better alternative than the regulation you can think of in the beginning of the process. So technical requirement
Abdel Salim, can you wrap up, please?
Yes, yes. This make the end of my presentation. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you very much for the presentation. It's very exciting to see that we have an organization that have established by member states. Then you are in charge of standards, you are in charge of technical regulation, you are in charge of conformity assessment. What are the main challenges of looking at all those responsibility, while we see in many countries what is being called good practice, you find a standard body, and you find the other bureaus or the ministries dealing with technical regulation. Yeah, but you have a big mandate of having standards, having technical regulation and conformity assessment.
Yes, thank you. This is a really a very important question. Yes, having this large event of a mandate make from GSO a large institution, although in the team it's a small team. And as you mentioned, Dr. Hermogen, the big or the main challenges, first of all, the main challenge is to have access to the knowledge. I guess the knowledge is the main, and this has been dealt with by giving some good experts in the team, and the GSO has access to good experts. The second thing is to have access to external expertise. And as I mentioned, I guess having built a team and network with conformity assessment bodies was a good step towards having access to this expertise, and it helped us. The challenge now is when you are developing a regulation, and when you are developing standard, and in some area you are involved in monitoring the conformity assessment, and you can even be involved in conformity assessment, this is the challenge. You have to separate. In some area you have to be clear and to say, this I have to do, this I have to separate from this. I have to separate activity of certification from activities of development regulation. This is some area which is very, very important to, and which make a challenge. But in terms of expertise, I guess the first step is the networking with the notified bodies, and the second step, the networking with economic operators. And I guess we are taking advantage from this collaboration with economic operators.
Yeah. In short, stakeholders are very key for implementation and accepting the work that you are doing, accepting the mark that you are putting on the product. Thank you very much. It's very enlightening to us, and I think we can learn some more we can use some of your key points in implementing the AFCFTA. That actually the implementation started this year in January. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, if you allow me, just one word, if you allow me, Doctor.
Yes, please.
Yeah, just I wanted to say, in this experience, personally, what I will say in our country, in Africa, when we are developing such system in general, of course, we have to take advantage from the benchmark, from the worldwide system which are existing. But my advice is not to take a single system and to adopt it. It's to start from where the other have reached, and then we have to adapt it in our situation in Africa. And we have experience and we have expertise. I guess I'm sure that Africa has a good expert to adapt the system, because Africa is dealing with North America and with Europe and even with Asia, and we have to make something which fit to Africa. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Your experience of 30 years, you should come back and we start benefiting from that experience. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Miss Sukena Mboji, who is an expert for almost 20 years in quality infrastructure, in international organization and the regional organization. She has very good experience while working in ECOWAS region, and we would like to give her the time to present to us TBT and SPS measures in practice as instrument for trade facilitation and market access for agriculture and food products. Skena, tu es la bienvenue.
Bonjour Hermogène. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for inviting me. So I think that I will switch in French for my fellow francophone and to make a balance. And then maybe somebody will also talk in Arabic.
Très bien, très bien. Merci.
Alors, je vais partager mon écran et nous allons faire donc une courte présentation de 5 minutes comme ce qui a été demandé. Juste le temps de partager. Voilà. Est-ce que c'est bon pour tout le monde? Allô, vous voyez mon écran?
Yeah, I just put it in presentation format. I think it's okay.
Is it okay now?
It's okay.
Okay, parfait.
I can see it from here.
All right. OK, donc bonjour à tous. Encore une fois, merci pour l'opportunité, Hermogène et Larceau. Donc, je m'appelle Sukena Mboji. Je suis consultante en management de la qualité et plus précisément food safety. Je suis ingénieure de formation en industrie alimentaire et je travaille un peu, on va dire, avec le secteur privé en accompagnant des entreprises pour la certification, mais aussi en faisant des formations, des accompagnements pour des mises à niveau, etc. Donc, c'est plutôt cet aspect-là que nous allons voir rapidement aujourd'hui. Alors, pour le premier slide, nous allons voir les définitions et liens entre les obstacles au commerce et les mesures contre les obstacles au commerce et les SPS et l'accès au commerce. Donc, d'abord, selon l'OMC, l'accord sur les obstacles techniques au commerce vise à faire en sorte que les règlements techniques, les normes et les procédures d'évaluation de la conformité soient non discriminatoires et ne créent pas d'obstacles non nécessaires au commerce. Les mesures sanitaires et phytosanitaires sont des exigences imposées sur des produits par les gouvernements pour contrôler certains types de risques liés à la vie et à la santé humaine, animale ou végétale. Donc, dans ce sens, les mesures sanitaires concernent la protection de la vie et de la santé des personnes ou des animaux, tandis que les mesures phytosanitaires portent sur la protection des végétaux. Le respect de ces mesures, que ce soit les OTC et ces SPS, facilite le libre échange entre les pays du même continent, mais également l'accès au marché international. Nous allons voir comment. Déjà, en évitant les barrières et permettant ainsi à tout un chacun de pouvoir commercer hors de son pays. Moi, Soukaina, si je veux aujourd'hui vendre des produits au Nigeria, je peux aisément les faire s'il n'y a pas ces barrières techniques au commerce. En évitant également des situations de crise ou de pandémie pouvant impacter négativement les échanges. Donc, ça aussi, c'est un autre effet que l'on peut accorder à ces mesures-là. Ensuite, un des points pour nous, pour moi en tout cas, qui est important, c'est l'appui qu'apportent ces mesures à la structuration de l'infrastructure de la qualité régionale et nationale, donc dont l'ARSO lui-même fait partie intégrante. Le respect des mesures OTC et SPS servent de levier à la structuration de l'infrastructure qualité régionale, mais aussi nationale. Comment déjà en permettant à tous les pays d'avoir à peu près le même niveau, en poussant également les pays qui n'ont pas encore mis en place une infrastructure qualité régionale de pouvoir le faire. Lors de l'élaboration des normes, par exemple au niveau de l'ARSO, comme l'a dit tout à l'heure Ruben, lors de l'élaboration des normes à harmoniser, la conformité aux mesures est utilisée et permet ainsi l'accès facilité à des normes permettant à tous les pays membres d'avoir des documents conformes et prêts à l'emploi dans le cadre d'une réglementation technique, par exemple. L'autre point, c'est aussi le souci de se conformer à ces mesures pousse les pays à mettre en œuvre une infrastructure de la qualité pour pouvoir être à niveau. Il faudra savoir qu'en mettant en place cette infrastructure de la qualité-là, nous mettons à niveau, nous relevons un peu le niveau qualité du pays et cela a de toute façon un impact sur la qualité des produits et ainsi sur l'économie. L'intérêt commun à travailler ensemble à une structuration régionale qui fonctionne permet également l'atteinte rapide des objectifs. Certains pays peuvent ne pas être plus prêts à se lancer que d'autres et ce travail en commun-là nous permet en tout cas, nous les pays africains, de nous mettre à niveau beaucoup plus rapidement. L'autre point qu'on voulait voir également, c'est l'instrument de facilitation du commerce et d'accès au marché. Le respect des mesures OTC permet l'accès plus facile à des marchés car les produits agricoles et alimentaires issus d'un pays ne sont pas soumis à des règlements techniques non fondés. Donc, cela permet également cette facilité-là. Le respect des mesures SPS, outre certains avantages comme le fait d'éviter certaines propagations de maladies, permet également une protection de la faune et de la flore locale et permet également pour un pays qui est en tout cas spécialisé dans un domaine de pouvoir rester spécialiste. L'accord sur les règlements à travers notamment l'harmonisation des normes permettent un même niveau d'information et accélère l'accès au marché de tous les pays, à tous les pays plutôt. L'accès aussi à une information et à des règles, entre guillemets, accessibles à tout type de structure, c'est-à-dire les très petites entreprises, les petites et moyennes entreprises, les industries, mais également des structures de conseil, permet de relever en fait l'économie des pays parce que toutes ces structures-là permettent d'avancer et de pouvoir en tout cas avoir un poids sur l'économie locale. Donc, enfin, la dernière slide, c'est sur les pistes d'amélioration qui pourraient également être éventuellement enrichies. Selon nous, donc, c'est l'évaluation de la mise en application des mesures SPS et déduire des mesures d'accompagnement et amélioration nécessaires. Nous tous, nous avons, en tout cas la plupart d'entre nous, voyagé en Afrique et on voit que parfois les mesures ne sont pas appliquées comme cela se doit et cela pourrait créer d'autres problèmes. Explorer également les échanges entre les États membres de l'ARSO sur les mesures OTC et SPS et leur impact sur le commerce intra-régional et pouvoir ainsi développer un plan d'action qui pourra nous permettre de relever ce niveau. Si non prévu ou bien si pas existant, voir dans quelle mesure créer une entité régionale continentale pour discuter de ces questions précisément. Et enfin, former et sensibiliser les acteurs à tous les niveaux sur les mesures et leurs avantages en tant qu'instrument de facilitation du commerce. Parce que nous autres, nous sommes très souvent dans des cercles et nous discutons entre nous. Et je pense que ce serait intéressant en tout cas de faire plus de formation et de sensibilisation pour que tout un chacun puisse voir les intérêts qu'ils peuvent avoir à mettre tout ceci en place et surtout à se renseigner. Donc, voilà pour moi. Donc, ça a été la présentation de 7 minutes exactement. Donc, j'attends vos questions. Merci à vous.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Skenan, tu viens aussi de nous donner ce qu'on peut améliorer au niveau continental. Qu'est-ce que les industries, ou bien au niveau national, qu'est-ce qu'on peut vraiment améliorer?
Désolée, j'étais en mute. Alors déjà, je pense qu'au niveau national, ce qui devrait être fait, c'est d'avoir un suivi beaucoup plus disons, à la carte, beaucoup plus adapté à tout type d'industrie parce que nous avons effectivement tout type d'entités et de structures et de différentes tailles qui n'ont peut-être pas les mêmes besoins, mais qui, moi, je suis sûre, ont un intérêt certain à connaître ces mesures OTC et ces mesures SPS. Ne pas seulement leur montrer la partie négative, on va dire, la partie où on leur dit, voilà, vous ne devez pas faire ça, etc., mais leur montrer quel est l'intérêt qu'ils doivent avoir à faire cela. Et encore une fois, pour moi, la sensibilisation à ce niveau-là doit être encore plus faite parce que parfois, les structures ne savent juste pas ce qu'il y a lieu de faire. Donc, ce serait ma suggestion. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Our next speaker is Stephen Jacquet, who is the Senior Program Officer at Fair Trade Africa. He is in agriculture management specialist, also an expert in compliance and certification process. Stephen will be presenting on a topic on obtaining Phytosanitary certificate for agro-food products and the
Sorry, we seem to have a challenge from the Secretary General. So I think the next presenter, please proceed and go ahead and do the presentation. Stephen, please go ahead.
So sorry for the connectivity.
Yeah.
I hope now you get me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was talking that our next speaker is Stephen Jacquet, who is a specialist in fair trade, and will be presenting on the experience of fair trade with regard to obtaining phytosanitary certificate for agro-food product and the private sector requirements. Stephen, yeah, you have 7 minutes. Thank you. Stephen, you can share your screen. Yeah, you are muted. You are muted.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'll quickly take you through fair trade and what we do.
You can put on a full screen, please. Yeah.
Okay, quickly, I'll give you a background of fair trade. After that, we'll look at the introduction, then look at the TBT requirements, then producers constant. Personally, I'm taking a different perspective from the other speakers because I'm now looking at the challenges that producers are facing in terms of compliance to SPS and TBT. Yeah, fair trade, our vision is a world in which all producers can enjoy secure and sustainable livelihood, fulfill their potential, and decide on their future. Fair trade certification mark is recognized across the world, and it's one of the certification mark that portrays that farmers or producers have complied to fair trade standard. And we operate across Africa, as you can see from the presentation. We are covering 4 regions, that is West Africa, Southern Africa Network, and Eastern Africa. We cover different products. From South Africa, we have different products. We have about 113 producers who are subscribed to fair trade standard. In West Africa, we have about 371 producers who are subscribed to fair trade standards. And in Middle East, sorry, we cover about 49 producers. And lastly, in East and Central Africa, we cover about 193 producers. So you can see the coverage of fair trade within Africa, and we are working with the small scale producers and hard labor together in different products. Looking at the SPS, I cannot dwell much into detail because the first speakers have already highlighted on the need to comply with the World Trade Organization agreements, and one of it is SPS and TBT. I only picked up some key highlights which is relevant to our producers. Basically, SPS focuses on the application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and it covers measures to protect plants and animals and human beings. It also covers the safety aspects, for example, fruits and vegetables, and also animal products. And the purpose actually is to protect the lives and health of human beings and animals and plants. TBT, on the other hand, focuses on the technical aspects that affect trade, such as conformity assessment and specification. Now, looking at some of the key areas that affect producers that we're dealing with, one of it is maximum residue levels, as highlighted in SPS, processing requirements, testing, inspection, and certification and approval procedures, packaging and labeling requirements, sampling procedures and methods of risk assessment, quarantine treatment, including relevant requirements associations with plants and animals. Now, looking at this requirement that has been highlighted here, you'll discover that the countries specific are required to enforce that all the producers and the people in supply chain comply with. But sometimes they're constant from the management, from the government perspective to ensure that all these are complied with. We have looked at some of the challenges that affect our producers in terms of ensuring that they comply with these all requirements as outlined in SPS. And therefore, some of the challenges that I've picked out are one, poor implementation of the set guidelines and the standards, lack of awareness of the regulations and the set guidelines, varying MRL requirements in different markets and products, lack of infrastructure for MRL testings, lack of technical capacity to implement requirements, poor infrastructure to maintain cold chain systems, high cost of compliance to different private standards, lack of technical support on setting up fumigation facilities, poor coordination between the government agency. I just want to expound more on two areas, that is varying MRL requirements in different markets and products. We have discovered, despite the fact that the producers are working much hard to comply with the SPS and TBT requirements, but you'll find some countries with private standards with stringent compliance requirements, and that actually restricts producers from accessing those countries because they have their specific standards with their specific MRL levels. So it becomes a total challenge. Another challenge that I want to highlight at this point in time is the cost of compliance to different private standards. Different countries are coming up with different standards, and it's really giving much burden to producers in terms of compliance. And therefore, there's need to harmonize these standards so that we bring all the requirements together to make it easier for the producers to be able to comply with these requirements. Another challenge that we have highlighted here is that there is a poor coordination between government agencies. Different countries have agents that are mandated by the government to support producers to ensure that they comply with SPS and TBT requirements. But these regulatory bodies are not working in harmony. They are not communicating in terms of ensuring whether the other country requirements is compliant with the country's specific requirements. And therefore, there's need for the government actually to work together in terms of ensuring if there's any change in another country that affects producers in terms of export, they need to quickly highlight it and inform the producers so that they're able to work out on how to comply with those requirements. Finally is conclusion, opportunity. There's actually opportunity to scale into African trade by minimizing trade barriers through standardization, lobbying governments to address gaps in technical supports, and create awareness among producers, engagement of global market for standardization of MRL requirements across the region. Yeah, thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. You have shown us the challenges, and one of the challenges is the high costs of compliance to different private standards, lack of coordination that you have also mentioned. And one other issue is you were talking about probably having one standard, harmonizing standard, working together with the Bureau of Standard, not to have so many standards that are required for the producers. But it seems that fair trade, you are doing well on the continent, looking at the certification that you have already given to many producers. How do you do it? How did you manage to do it, looking at fair trade as a private standards organization, where the public government bodies are probably not doing very well? For you, it looks like you have been doing well. Well, what is the secret?
Yeah, the secret is one, we are covered across the regions, and we have a clear working structure in terms of supporting our producers. Where we feel that there are challenges, there is lobbying with the governments that is affected. And also we do a lot of trainings, sensitizations to the standards requirements, and more so advocacy. I can give you just an example that we had in Ethiopia, whereby we had a challenge exporting to Australia because of the stringent measures that Australia had put in place. But after conducting training and understanding the Australians' requirements, we managed to train our producers, and as we are speaking now, they have complied with all the Australians' requirements and are able now to export to that particular market. So ideally, what we have done is to reach out to our producers through training and also through lobbying and also through advocacy with different governments to understand the requirements, and then we are able to replicate back to our producers. Although it's not an easy task because we are limited in terms of resources, and you can see we are covering a wide area of Africa. So there is need now for partnership with the other like-minded organizations so that we are able to cascade these procedures or trainings to our producers to be able to understand the requirements of the markets, because that has been the gap. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like the way you do it, like the issue of lobbying, advocacy, training. I think it's very crucial for the implementation of standard. Thank you very much for your insight, Stephen. Our next speaker is Hakim Mufumbiro, who is the head of Food and Agriculture Standard Division at the National Bureau, the Uganda National Bureau of Standard. He has an experience of almost 18 years in standardization, and he currently is the coordinator of the CC Africa, the Codex Africa, the Africa region. It's very good to have you, Hakim. While I know that there is a lot that Codex is doing at the African continent, probably we get an opportunity to hear more on the CISA Africa and the work that you are conducting. And I think it's your first year as the coordinator. It's good to start engaging early with ARSO. Hakim will be presenting on trade effects of SPS and TBT measures on agricultural products in Africa, focusing on the role of Codex Alimentarius standards. Hakim, you can share your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamojin, for the introduction. And I will now do the sharing of the presentation, which is a short presentation I prepared to be able to share with all the participants here in this session. As introduced, Hakim Mufumbiro, I work at UNBS. I coordinate activities for Codex in Africa currently, still in the first year of the coordination, and Uganda will be able to take over the role, has taken over the role from our colleagues from Kenya, who have been coordinators for the last 5 years or so. My presentation will focus mainly on building on the context of how Codex gets into the picture. I'll probably focus on a number of Codex standards and the AFCTA. I'll give my thought recommendations on what needs to be done by the member states, by the RECs, in order to get on board with regard to standards, and I'll do a conclusion after that. So in terms of the context, I thought I'd share just probably the scorecard of the Codex system, and focusing on mainly the mandate of Codex, which is protecting the health of consumers, as well as ensuring fair practices in the food trade, but as well promoting the coordination of all food standards development. So Codex holds that dual mandate. And of course, as you know, it's an organization that has two parents, FAO and WHO, and has been in existence now close to 60 years in 2023. So and has been very active in developing international food standards in the areas that are critical in trading in Africa as we roll out the African Continental Free Trade Area. If you look at the scorecard, I think that one of the private sector players has already touched on some of the deliverables that are in the Codex system, maximum levels, maximum residue levels for pesticides, as well as residues for veterinary drugs, contaminants, wealth of commodity standards for products which are traded internationally, but as well from the CC Africa side, we have been able to undertake development of commodity standards for products which are traded regionally. So I think that is one of the milestones that we could be able to count from the CC Africa side. But ultimately, there have not been very many standards which have been developed within the regions, CC Africa inclusive, because most of the standards have been based on the internationally recognized standards developed in the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So generally, Codex develops standards, codes of practice, guidelines, recommendations, and a number of other deliverables which are intended to support trade in food and agricultural products. The objective of Codex is about safe, good food for everyone, everywhere. So and the recognition made to Codex standards, the WTO agreement focuses on ensuring that products meet the food safety standards which are established by the Codex Alimentarius. And with that recognition, it places Codex as one of the three sisters in the SPS agreement, the others being OIE and the International Plant Protection Convention. So for plant and for animal and plant respectively. So Codex focuses mainly on the food safety side, but as you know, you cannot have food security if you're producing a lot of food unless if you have food safety. So it's a very key component in ensuring that whereas you have enough food, it must actually be safe for it actually to be traded. And most of the standards, most of the limitations that for movement of products are actually related to differences in standards within the countries, not harmonized at all, and that creates barriers for free movement of goods. If you look at the current membership in the Codex, close to 190 members, 188 member countries, and the EU, which is a member organization, and this is literally almost 99% of the world population. So technically, this is a truly global organization, and the system is robust enough and one of the most effective and functional system in the UN arena. You look at the observers. I focused on the observers here because one of the observers among the 59 intergovernmental organizations, which are IGOs, is actually ARSO. And I think through this engagement, we should be able to see increased presence of ARSO in the Codex system, having assumed that status of observer in Codex, and it should be able to rally members to be able to engage effectively in the Codex system, and there are many areas for collaboration in a way. The work of development of standards is through Codex committees. Currently, there are 23 active Codex committees at different levels: policy, regional, vertical, and horizontal committees. At the regional level, that's where we have CC Africa, which is the Codex Coordinating Committee for Africa, whose role is to coordinate development of regional standards in Africa, as well as support members in the African region to participate effectively in the Codex work. So you see that there are 49 members, and automatically you'd want to know where the 6 are to make the 55 under the African Union. Under the Codex system, there's a new region called the Near East. So a number of members in North Africa are actually not members in CC Africa, although they're actually members in the African Union. So, but it's a Codex system that has been on for some time, but we collaborate with them to ensure that we speak one voice. As I get to the final parts of my presentation, noting the time I was allocated, I would now like to focus on Codex standards and the AFCTA to indicate that these are clearly key tools as provided in Annex 7 of the AFCTA agreement on SPS, and was highly elaborated by the technical director in ARSO. The standards are vital in supporting intra-regional trade in Africa for agricultural products, and literally the health and safety of the over 1.3 billion consumers in Africa will be protected as a result of applying standards in trade. That is what the value proposition for standards is, or SPS measures and related activities. I picked out a number of standards which I thought, if the AFCTA is going to be successful in terms of ensuring enhancement of intra-Africa trade in food commodities, these are some of the key areas, and I note that I think some of them were alluded to in the elaborate presentation, the first presentation that we got, but to really refocus that with the wealth of these standards, it's possible to ensure that if members actually applying these standards, then we should not be having a problem with movement of goods from one part of Africa to another. And if they're actually applying the Codex standards, then the movement will even be more freer as envisaged in the WTO TBT agreement, to ensure that if you're applying international standards, the movement of goods is predictable, is freer, and you will be able to get as much market as possible. Whenever we have seen countries that have been able to implement most of these general standards as well as guidelines, they actually been able to excel in terms of having products get into the market. I also picked out a number of standards which I thought were critical in the COVID era, and these are probably standards which are in the food import and export inspection and certification systems, and this is now the way to go. Issues of equivalence, issues of certificates, that paperless certification. This is where the world is now going, and COVID has showed us that that you don't need to have all these paperwork for you to actually move products from one part of the world to the other. So this should be one of the areas which we should be able to collaborate with the ARSO to mainstream most of these areas which identified support international trade to be cascaded within the African continent for them to support the intra-Africa trade. Some of the recommendations I have is, of course, adoption of and use of Codex standards in designing measures. So the experience we've received is that countries that have demonstrated the use and adoption of Codex standards have had a smoother ride when it comes to trading and ensuring that the safety of their consumers is protected. There should also be an issue regarding participation in the development of international standards. And this is where we would have a clarion call for the member states, the regional economic communities, which are the bigger blocks in Africa, as well as the international government organizations, such as intergovernment organizations such as African Union or ARSO and other international standard setting organizations, regional standard setting organizations, should effectively participate in the development of these regional and international food standards in order to have the voices input there. There is a need, of course, it would be extremely difficult to even think that goods will actually be able to move smoothly within Africa if the food control systems are not really redesigned and effectively implemented in most of the parts of Africa. The truth of the matter is that most of the food control systems are heavily dysfunctional. There's a lot of uncoordination, and with a dysfunctional infrastructure, you cannot expect trade to actually flow as expected. So this is one of the issues that we think should be able to spur intra-Africa trade as a matter of fact, because once you lay the infrastructure, you should be able to get into the system as easily as possible. Of course, the issue of the investments in the SPS and TBT area, this is something that we need to focus on. And as CC Africa, we are keen on advocating at the policy level, at the African Union level, for governments to really have targeted investments in the SPS and the TBT area to ensure that countries or member states are able to refocus their resources in terms of supporting the SPS and TBT infrastructure to functionally support trading systems. And the last recommendation, of course, is strengthening collaboration between CC Africa and ARSO to drive standardization in Africa. And this has not been well structured in the past. We need to see this growing in terms of what are the collaborative mutual areas for collaboration, and such that, because the objective that we're looking at is to ensure that we have one standard in Africa that can be able to support, or in the region that can be able to support trade. And because of the mandates that we have, we should be able to design mechanisms of collaborating and ensuring that that is achieved. Finally, participants, I would like to conclude by saying that general standards make life better. If we focus on effective implementation of standards, this is important in Africa to avoid the impacts on trade. Without applying the necessary SPS and TBT measures, trade will be affected in Africa substantially. So this is the kind of message that needs to cut across the entire framework or system in the African region, from all levels, from the policy side up to the last person on the ground. And of course, there is a high potential to improve livelihoods of African people through implementation of standards, because of the benefits that we have seen in implementing SPS-related measures as well as TBT. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I close my presentation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hakim. Actually, looking at your presentation, I was asking my question, why, as you said, why do we have 49 countries on CC Africa, while we have 55 member states of African Union? And you said Near East, Near West, Near South. I wonder if we're gonna one day have the Africa divided once again on issues related to standard, while we all aim by the WTO, we all aim to have international standard as the supreme. Then we go down to continental, and when those standards or measures are not there, it's when we can go really down at the national level. That's really my question. The other important information that is there, when you were talking about one organization member, which is the European Union, actually, as probably we have now the AFCFTA, those who are participating on behalf of AFCFTA, or even also on behalf of the African Union, I think this is one of the key issues that we should start discussing, that we have another organization that can participate as organization. If not, we participate not as observer, as ARSO, but we participate as a member, depending on the requirements. I think those, you created in mind some of those questions that I am not giving those questions to you, but probably to link to that. Yeah, because we have seen organizations dealing with issues which are enablers to trade, intra-Africa trade, but still mention sub-Saharan Africa, yeah, or as if sub-Saharan is not Africa. What do you think during your chairmanship that CC Africa can do together with ARSO to change this concept, yeah, of not having one Africa when it comes to issues like the standardization? We have a motto that we preach on the ARSO, where we say during this AFCFTA that one standard, one market. What do you think we should do in this area, Hakim?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hamajin. And I think you have raised very good quick feedback questions regarding some of the things that I touched on in my presentation. One, the first aspect that you relate to with regarding to 49 versus 55 countries, I probably brushed over it a little bit fast. I could have provided additional details in the Codex system, there are currently 6 regions that of groupings of countries. And every member that joins the Codex, of course, asks which region to actually belong to. But if you're in Africa, I would expect that you actually join as an African bloc. So many of the countries that joined the Codex committee for the Near East, the Near East is really what you would call the Middle East anyway, are mainly the countries that joined Codex in the earlier phases, and that was the region that was active at that time. CC Africa only became active in 1975, but Codex actually started the operations in 1963. So because of that, countries that were already progressive, and you can see countries that are already highly developed, Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, so they already had structures. Their quality infrastructure is very sound. So they had to belong somewhere on the already existing systems. I think that was the reason. But in terms of having harmonized positions, through the African Union Inter-Africa Bureau for Animal Resources Framework, we actually carry one position with even the countries that are not part of CC Africa per se. But we actually carry one message, even with countries that are in the Near East, like Egypt and Algeria and Libya. So we're actually doing that, and we are happy to further engage to have that system working. The issue of the observer status versus the membership status, I think you've rightly put it and is spot on. If you look at the contribution of the European Union, the Codex system, it is strong because they're not just observers, but they're actually members. So when it comes to decision making, they're actually part of the decision making that happens in the Codex system. While you're an observer, there are levels that you can actually not be able to reach because of the limitations of observer status. So I would really appeal to ARSO to refocus in this area. It is possible to gain that status of a membership. You need to demonstrate that there is visibility in terms of presence in participation. And in fact, as ARSO is taking time, in fact, the EAC wants to become a member in Codex for just 6 countries, but there's no need for the EAC to actually explore that if ARSO is actually intentional and moving towards getting the wider membership status in the Codex system. So we could provide that support. We could further engage and see what it should be able to take and improve that kind of status. Otherwise, in my view, as Uganda as a coordinator would actually want to bring on board all the regional economic communities, and if most of the countries can confirm here, we have actually been intentional in bringing on board all the regional economic communities as well as African Union and also to help us in the coordination arrangement, because we do not think that as a country will actually be able to deliver the coordination activities that relate with Codex and food safety to where we want it to go if we don't move along with all the regional economic communities and the organizations like ASTO. So our intention is that we need to strengthen this collaboration. We need to see which areas we should be able to focus on and we should be able to design probably interventions together, capacity building initiatives to strengthen Africa's presence and effectiveness in the coordination in food safety and Codex activities in regionally and globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Achim. Thank you all the presenters. I would like, we have a few questions that came from the participant on the chat box. 2 questions for that Ruben, you can address. The one participant asked that they are, you have shown the models of harmonization of standard. That is there a model of about legislation and function, government entity, functional interface at the institutional level? Mainly, in short, is there harmonization or a way of institutional framework at the national level? That's a model that you can share. The other question you can address is how ARZO works with the regional economical communities. Ruben?
Yeah, thank you very much for those questions. And I think they are actually questions that we need to ask ourselves at the national level. How do you ensure that the institutional interfaces are effective? One way that we had proposed earlier, and I think this is one of the documents that we have had under development for quite some time, is that we need to have a coordination, and the coordination needs to be in an office that is slightly higher than ministerial levels, so that there is no fighting among the ministers that there is one minister who is stronger than the other. In most of the political systems that we have in the continent, you might find that there is either a deputy president or there is a prime minister. And one of the ways that some countries have managed this is to have that coordination unit at that higher level, where the institutions are now able to be focused, not to fight among themselves, but to really ensure that the countries participate in trade in a very effective way, so that the institutions don't seem not to be answering to one another, but to be united and answering to the nation. So if you find the TPT institutions are in a different ministry, it's natural that they are probably in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And then you find the SPS and food safety ministries, institutions are either in the veterinary services or in the ministries of health. And therefore there is that need to have a coordination unit that is located at a higher office that brings together and focuses on the bigger picture of delivering for the country to trade. So that's one way that I think we had proposed, although this is something that of necessity has to take place at the national level. So it's not something that can be forced down from continental level, but something that is necessary for purpose of ensuring that we're able to coordinate issues. And I think those countries that have done so, they are doing well. Now, the next point is about the regional economic communities. And we do work quite closely with them in terms of the kind of standards that we are using. So if we look at our model, the African Standards Harmonization model, you find that the standards that come from the regional economic communities enter the harmonization process at a higher level than when the standards come from the national level. So they enter at the inquiry level, in which case they move faster across the harmonization process, taking mostly 6 months to 12 months at most. And yes, we have used the regional economic community standards. For example, from SADC, we have used standards from ESC, and we have used standards also from ECOWAS. So once the benefit of this is that those regional economic community standards have had some good level of consensus, and therefore it is easier for them to move up the harmonization process faster than when it comes from a national standard. And in that case, we know that already the countries in the regional economic community are able to support the process of fast tracking those standards and move them across much faster. The benefit of this also is that now we will be having one standard instead of having the 8 standards in the regional economic communities or the 55 standards in each of the countries. And therefore, it is important that we work in that sense. The other way we've engaged the regional economic communities is the creation of what we call the Joint Advisory Group to effectively participate in the harmonization process. Now, what we didn't mention is that within also that system, we also have the Standards Management Committee where the regional economic communities are effectively controlling the process of harmonization. And therefore, they are able to take into account that the harmonization at the continental level is not in divergence with the regional economic communities. So there are quite a number of ways, and we integrate it as one moving forward as a continental, standards harmonization process.
Thank you, Ruben. Abselam, il y a une question de participant. Te demanda quelle est la liaison entre la certification GSO au point de normes nationales.
Oui, merci, docteur. J'espère que vous m'entendez.
Oui, on t'entend.
D'accord, donc merci, c'est une question très importante. Alors, pour le cas du GSO, comme je l'ai dit au début, comme le GSO est une institution qui procède à une large éventail de tâches, et au fait, normalement, la certification n'est pas une tâche du GSO. GSO ne certifie pas. Toutefois, nous avons un scheme qui est vraiment à la limite de la certification. Nous avons un scheme qui s'appelle l'authentification des certificats. C'est un scheme pour les véhicules automobiles et les motocycles pour lesquels, normalement, il y a une self-certification, first part, de self-certification de la première partie, et le GSO procède à une authentification de ça. Et alors, c'est une action qui est vraiment à la limite. Mais à part ça, le GSO ne procède pas à la certification. Donc, le GSO, comme on avait dit, il développe des réglementations, il développe des normes et il assure une qualification des organismes de certification, lesquels organismes certifient les produits avant d'avoir le J-marking. C'est un peu comme ce que fait la Commission européenne. Donc, nous avons des Conformity Assessment Body qui sont en Asie, en Europe, au nord d'Amérique, qui, eux, certifient les produits. Donc, j'espère clarifier ce point. Le GSO ne certifie pas, surtout pour les produits sous réglementation GSO. À part le scheme de véhicules automobiles, comme j'ai dit, où il y a un scheme d'authentification.
Merci beaucoup. Stefan, there was a question asking if fair trade develop their own standards or they use ARZO standards. Stefan, are you still with us?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, fair trade, we are implementing a fair trade international standard that has been developed by Fair Trade International. Fair Trade International is an non-governmental organization that has brought together all fair trade certified producers and also the National Fair Trade Organization. So they came together and came up with a standard that is referred to as fair trade. Fair Trade International came up with a standard which is now referred to as fair trade standard, and it's applicable to different products. So we have one for the small producers organization, and we have the other one for the hired labor. So what Fair Trade does, Fair Trade Africa represents all the certified members. Yeah, and they have a view when it comes to review and change of the standard. The Fair Trade International has to consult the members, and we as Fair Trade are the representative of the members who are now Fair Trade certified. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually to mention that Fair Trade actually has also an MOU with also on benchmarking. to avoid duplication. Thank you, Stephen. The last question from the participant was to Hakeem, that as a trader, how can I trust the standard of Codex? Are these standards adopted at the national level and the REC level? Hakeem?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think what is important in standards is that the process of development is one of the principles we use is openness and transparency. So anyone who is in trading, is in the industry, should be able to actually participate freely. And the process that we use for transparency is that we provide the information to all the key interested stakeholders at different times during the development. I know that in a number of countries, probably some of this information does not filter through, which is one of the bottlenecks that I highlighted probably in my presentation on food control systems. So there could be some missing gaps in the effectiveness of filtering of the information. However, what we do is that because the Codex standards are based on the best available science, that is the kind of trust that is actually built in there. And the rigor that goes into the risk assessment, the rigor that goes into arriving at a particular requirement or limit that is put in the standard, that's what gives the comfort to anyone who is in the industry to be able to actually use a standard. If I use an example of Uganda, I can demonstrate the level of adoption. For example, out of there are now close to 350 Codex standards for commodities. Commodities, I mean products like oranges or fats and oils or specific commodities. Uganda has probably adopted close to 50% directly adoption. And because we think we don't need to really reinvent the wheel, we don't need to develop a new standard for cheese because it has already been developed internationally. So we adopt them as national standards. For some, we only use them for developing our own regulations, and actually also highlighted that in our presentation. At the REC level, if I talk about the ESC that I'm very familiar with, the ESC is one of the fastest regions in terms of development of regional standards, and most of the standards in the food and agriculture area, they are heavily based on the Codex system. So if you talk about standards for food additives, they are completely based on the Codex. Residues of veterinary drugs, they are completely based on Codex. Limits of pesticide residues are completely based on Codex. So that is the kind of approach that we're now bringing at the ASO level. And I know that ASO has been steadfast in terms of reinventing itself in the number of committees that are available, and they're going into the same direction. So very soon we will be seeing those recommendations coming through the ASO system as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, Hakeem, as there are no other questions, I would like, what is the takeaway message for you for this important webinar in 1 minute?
Yeah, thank you, SG. No, my takeaway message is that for trade to move as freely and predictable as possible in the African continent as envisaged through the documents that have been negotiated at the continental level, there is a heavy need for all the member states to develop and implement effective food control systems. That is the only way we'll have robust infrastructure at all the member states level for them to be able to trade safely and effectively. Without robust infrastructure at the member states level, the trade will not happen, because essentially trade happens between and among the members and not really through fancy policy documents and related instruments. So we'd want to see members really investing in SPS and TBT specific areas, intentional investments in food safety and related activities, such that they're able to be promoted to support the intra-Africa regional trade. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stefan, what would be your takeaway message in 1 minute, please?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, my takeaway message is that there's need to harmonize the standards for easy implementation across the region. And I believe that is what ARSO is all about. So we need just to support each other in terms of areas that one is stronger. Like in terms of harmonization of standard, we believe ARSO is in a capacity, and with the support from other stakeholders, I believe we'll be able to achieve our vision of South-South market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Skena, quelle serait ta recommandation après ce webinaire? Une seule recommandation qu'on peut partir avec.
Alors, la recommandation que je pourrais donner, c'est déjà de continuer le travail qui est déjà enclenché, le travail d'harmonisation et de travail entre pays africains, parce que c'est très important et pour moi, c'est la clé pour arriver à nos résultats, quels qu'ils soient. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Abselam, en attendant que tu reviens en Afrique, quelle serait ta recommandation pour ce webinaire?
Merci, docteur. Je n'ai jamais quitté l'Afrique. Je suis toujours de cœur et je n'ai jamais quitté l'Afrique. Mais comme vous l'avez si bien dit, si j'ai à dire une recommandation, c'est développer un modèle africain en tenant compte des expériences du monde. Tenir compte des expériences du monde, mais de développer un modèle africain.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Ruben, what would you be the takeaway message from this webinar?
Yeah, for me, what I do see is that as a continent, we really need dialogue among ourselves. We need dialogue at the national level to ensure that we get to harmonize our approaches. We have a fine document that is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and we need to get maximum out of it. And we can only do that if we get our institutions to understand that their contributions are important in moving in one direction. We do have a lot of potential, focused potential of what amount of trade will happen if we can, implement the agreement, but that will depend on how the institutions play their part. We have the African quality policy that streamlined the way institutions need to be at the national level. And we believe that if it is implemented at the national level, it is possible that we can have institutions that are coherent and are able to move forward. And therefore, it is important that we streamline the institutions at the national level, and we streamline the operations at the continental level, because we're having these various committees established so that they can guide the continent towards having a cohesive approach towards ensuring that free movement of goods can happen by having the standards, SPS and TBTs working together rather than working in silos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And toward concluding our webinar, you have had participant panelists. You have had issues coming from the private organization dealing with standard and certification. You have had from GSO, while they also are in charge of standard, they are also in charge of technical regulation. They developed their model that work for their stakeholders. You have had the issues of membership to different organizations, being UN organization or continental organization. This was a webinar that was really looking at what are different models that exist, what can we use as Africa. One of the key message that we should go with is the development of an Africa model. An Africa model, when we are considering the SPS and the TBT issues. You have seen that there is interference between SPS and TBT. We shouldn't just copy paste a model from somewhere. We should really think of and analyze the needs of our stakeholders. When you look at the need of stakeholders, it's bring to the second key point on advocacy, awareness creation, and training of producers and exporters. Actually, also advocacy at the level for policy organ, and actually the word which has been used, lobbying, at different levels for implementation of standard. Third, it's the harmonization of standard, which is very key to that. We should avoid duplication, that we should bring together the ARZO work and the Codex work at the African level and work closely to avoid confusing our market, confusing the users of this standard. The other part is the other point is to develop a really robust quality infrastructure system, mainly on food safety. That's also include the issues of testing, capability at the country level. The last point that is very, very important is to look at how Africa can become a member of Codex. While we are now moving with the AFCFTA implementation, how can we also have Africa as an organization, as really a member, not just having ARZO as an observer at the Codex level? It would be unfair if I don't probably mention mainstreaming the private standards into a public standard, or working together or benchmarking with these private standards. Those are the key point that I took from this webinar. I would like to have this opportunity and thank our presenters, Ruben Gisore, Technical Director, ARZO. I would like to thank Engineer Abdesalam, who is the Head of Technical Regulation and Conformity Directorate at GSO, for your good presentation. Merci Soukena pour aussi ta présentation. Je voudrais aussi remercier Stephen Jacket. Thank you very much for your presentation on behalf of Fair Trade Africa. I would like also to thank Hakim, the coordinator of CC Africa, for your presentation and accepting our invitation. It would be not a good webinar if we come and we link, we connect on the Zoom and find ourselves as panelists and moderator. I thank the participants that have been always following ARZO webinar every month, and we have another webinar coming on next month, June, that we will post it, and I welcome you to connect once again and discuss the issue of quality infrastructure for our continent. If you may allow, lastly, if you can put on your camera, and we have a group photo, a virtual group photo that's for this event. Please put on your camera, have a good smile, the one you have been putting under the mask due to COVID. Now it's an opportunity that we can show our smile and have a group photo. Dan, you can take group photo. I thank you very much. Looking forward to see you next month. Yeah. Thank you very much and bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, hope you are done with